I'm Monique Sharp, and this is Get Sharp, where I'm lucky enough to chat with people just like you on turning fear into focus and leveling up their lives. This episode contains discussion of pregnancy loss, premature birth, neonatal intensive care, and infant death, which may be distressing for some listeners. Teegan bravely shares the story of her son Steele, born at 25 weeks and held earthside for 27 days, speaking openly about love, grief, and what it means to live beyond the kind of loss you never could imagine would happen to you. If this conversation brings up anything for you, please press pause and step away as needed, and consider reaching out to Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Beyond Blue on 1300 22 46 36, or even local support services for pregnancy and infant loss. I appreciate you sharing your story for the benefit of hopefully helping others who might be experiencing something similar. You wanted to chat today about baby Steele, born in 2023, and your experience with grief.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's something that I try to be pretty open about and have, spoken openly and helped a few different people. It's something that is super hard to talk about, and not a lot of people do talk about it. I find it gets swept under the rug. It's scary, and it's really overwhelming, especially for people who are on the outside of it and don't understand it. So, I think it's really good to keep the conversation going and to see that it's okay to talk about it, and you don't have to be scared about having those conversations, especially with bereaved parents. Like, they actually want to talk about it most of the time, and allowing them that space and that forum to do it is just super important.
It's very courageous of you to approach such a sensitive topic for yourself in such a way. So I just want to say thank you for that. Can you talk to me about the experience itself? What was happening in the lead up to Steele's passing?
It's something that I have been over in my mind so many times, so it feels like just yesterday that I lived it. In the lead up, we fell pregnant with him at the end of 2022, towards the end, and he was our 6th pregnancy, but to be our 3rd child. So we have 2 older children. Daisy at the time was 5, turning 6, and Tiger was just turned 2. So 3rd baby, we were super excited. It was nothing really out of the ordinary. The pregnancy went really well. We'd had miscarriages before. We got past that 12-week hump. He was looking great. We'd done the NIP test. There was no issues with him physically. And then we had moved house, so it was a busy time. My job was stressful at the time. And about in February, I went in for my 20-week scan, and it was a male sonographer, and he said to me, I'm just going to do the last check, which is to check your cervix. And he checked my cervix length, and he was like, look, on the abdominal ultrasound, it shows that it's quite shortened, but I want to do an internal so I can confirm that. Now, for someone who has never heard of incompetent cervix, my mind was not there at all. And he was like, I'll send the info through to your obstetrician and she can have a chat with you and you can go from there. And I think it was only 4 days later that the hospital called me and said, we've just got a referral here saying that it was flagged that your cervix is short. So we really want you to come in. It's something that we're keeping on top of. I was like, that's fine, popped in. In that ultrasound, she said, yes, it's still short. I will send you a referral to a specialist, which is across the road. When I met with her, there was a lot of red flags in that appointment. He kind of dismissed me, and I was a little bit confused because I'd spoken to my friend who was a sonographer, and she was kind of like, oh, they're going to do a cervical stitch. And I thought, oh, well, I don't even know what that is. Like, I didn't really understand, like, why would you get one? You know, how serious is this? You know, was not understanding the gravity of it at all. And then I went and saw the obstetrician, and she was someone I'd never seen before. And basically she was like, everything's fine. You look fine. Baby looks fine. Keep taking the progesterone pessaries, which is what they give you. Then she went to hand me another referral, and it had someone else's name on it. And I was like, this isn't me. And she kind of looked a bit flustered and went, oh, yep, okay, sorry. And then kind of looked at me funny and then searched and then found my name and then printed me new ones. Anyway, at the time, again, didn't think about it. I asked her, should I be stressed? Should I be doing exercise? Should I be having sex? And she goes, no, everything's fine. Do whatever you want to do. And everything's fine. Basically it was less than a 10-minute appointment.
Can you help us to understand, as somebody who's not been pregnant, I'm not aware of what a shortened cervix means or what the length of the cervix has to do with your pregnancy?
Basically, when you're pregnant, your cervix is what keeps the baby in. So your cervix clogs up with this mucus plug and it basically becomes very tight and it stops the baby from falling out. Ideally, it's 3 centimetres and above long. If it's under that, alarm bells start ringing. If it's 2.5 centimetres, it's a bit more serious. If it's 20 centimetres and below, it's very serious. At the time, I was around 21 centimetres, 21 millimetres, so 2.1 centimetres. And so just really in that grey area. And there's 2 ways that they can kind of help. The first one is to give you progesterone because it is shown that progesterone will either lengthen your cervix or stop you from contracting, basically, and starting to go into preterm labour. The other thing that they can do is put in a cervical stitch. So they literally stitch your cervix shut. So I was on the progesterone, and then the protocol was to have me on the progesterone and to do weekly cervical scans and just to make sure that it wasn't shortening. Then I had a lot of stress and some pretty horrible things happening at work at the time. And about 3 days after my third scan, when you're about to go into labour, you lose your mucus plug. So at the time, I was thinking, I'm 25 weeks pregnant. Why would I be losing my mucus plug? I also noticed that I was feeling really unwell. I was feeling like fluey, really like lethargic. I hadn't been eating or sleeping very well, like very, very unwell. And on the Friday morning, I woke up and I was like, no, I'm going to take myself to the hospital. I was going to go and have my glucose test, which you have to have it around 25 weeks just to make sure you don't have gestational diabetes. But I dropped the kids off in the morning and I was like, no, I'm going to go straight to the hospital and maybe we can do the glucose at the same time. I was feeling a bit sore throat, runny nose. As I was waiting out the front, I started to get really bad cramps and then they started becoming quite consistent. So I went in and they hooked me up to a monitor that would monitor the fetal activity and monitor contractions if I was having them. And then things started to get a little bit serious. They said, we're noticing that the contractions are quite close together. This could just be that you're under a bit of stress and you just need to relax and calm down and they'll stop, but we'll keep monitoring you. So then my husband came over. They said we'll also do a test which will tell us how likely you are to go into labour. So there is a specific test that they can do with women who are showing preterm labour signs to see if they're actually close to going into labour. Now, it's a really rare test and some of the hospitals don't even carry it. So they did it on me and it came back like a 2% chance that I was going to go into labour in the next week.
Wow.
And I thought, awesome, I'm in the clear, 2% chance, that's really low. And they said, no, anything is considered a positive, so we're concerned. So then they said to me, look, you are at risk of going into preterm labour and we are concerned that baby could come early. What we want to do is give you a shot of steroids to help his lung development and blah, 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 blah. And that's when I was kind of like, okay, they actually think I'm going to go into preterm labour here. So then things kind of happened really quickly. They said to us, okay, we're going to fly you to Melbourne because if you do have him, we don't have the facilities here. So we're 3.5 hours away in Albury-Wodonga from major city, which is Melbourne. That's when I started to panic. I'm like, I've got 2 kids here, I've got a job, I've got, what am I supposed to do? I don't want it. And they're like, no, we're going now. The ambulance is coming. I'm like, no, I need to see my kids before I go. Like, I can't not see them. How long am I going to be there? And they were like, you could basically be there until you hit 32 weeks, which is when we would be able to deliver him here. So quickly got on the plane, and they'd given me something to try and stop the contractions. Wasn't really working. Got down to Melbourne. I was in so much denial at this point. I was like, everything's going to be fine. I'll just, the contractions are going to stop. I'll go home. Everything will be fine. And I even told my husband, I was like, you don't need to come down. Like, I'll be home soon. And then his mum said to me, no, you go. You better go. So he drove down and ended up with a speeding ticket, which is good.
That'd be right.
So then when he got down there, I did feel that things were starting to slow down. I felt that the contractions weren't that bad. And then they said, look, everything seems fine. Go up to the ward and go and have a sleep, basically. As soon as I lied down, this is about 10:30 at night, they got worse. The contractions were 2-3 minutes apart. I was just praying and hoping. I was just lying there. I was like, if I just go to sleep, they'll stop. If I just go to sleep, they'll stop. But I couldn't go to sleep because they were so painful. I was timing them. David had fallen asleep in the chair. I didn't want to wake him. I wanted him to sleep. And then it hit me at about 2 a.m. I'm like, they're not stopping. He's coming. All of a sudden, like, the pain just went through the roof. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I woke Dave up. I was like, help me. Like, get the nurse in here. Get the doctor here. Like, this isn't right. I'm not okay. And the pain was so bad. And all of a sudden, once I got really anxious, it got worse and worse. Then the doctor came in and she's like, you're 4 centimetres dilated. Like, he's coming. We're going to move you down to the birth room. And I just lied there, just in absolute complete, like, denial. I was like, this isn't happening. I was in so much shock, and people talking to me, I wasn't responding. I'm like, I can't believe my body's doing this. Why is it doing this? And they moved me down into the birth suite, and I said to them, please give me some morphine, because that's what helped with Daisy and my contractions stopped. Like, this will help this time, it'll work. And they were like, okay, we will. And they gave it to me, and I just went to sleep, and like, not sleep, I was not asleep, but I was kind of just dozing. And Dave was beside the bed holding my hand, and there was a nurse watching the monitor, and I knew, because I was so still and quiet, Dave thought my contractions had stopped. And he was relaxing. And the whole time I could feel the contraction after contraction after contraction. I knew that they weren't stopping. I knew he was coming, and I just lied there still as I could, just holding him in for every last second that I could. Just did not want him to come out. I was like, no, I just won't move, and he'll stay in. And Dave thought I was asleep, and he said to the nurse, can this happen? I knew the nurse could see on the screen that they weren't stopping, and she was like, yeah, sometimes it can. And I was just so devastated. And then eventually the doctor came over to me, and he said, do you feel like you need to push? And I had for hours, but they were monitoring Steele, and I knew that he wasn't, like, in distress. And he said, do you feel like you need to push? And I said, yeah, I have for hours, but I'm just trying to keep him in. And he's like, you need to push now. And I was like, okay. And so we delivered him, and they came in and they explained to us, he's 25 weeks and 4 days. He's had 1.5 shots of steroids. Like, he's got a 60% chance. And when you're told those odds, you just think, I will absolutely be in the 60%. There is no other option than me being in the 60%. You just don't think about the other option. And he came out, and they told us he'd be about 4 450 grams to 500 grams, but he was 900 grams. So they're like, that's really good. He's big. He's not really needing help breathing. They did like the tests that they do on him. Like they had like 20 people in the room and a NICU doctor there and a neonatal specialist. And they're like, he looks really good, but we've intubated him, so we've put a tube down his throat just to help him, but he really probably doesn't need it. And then they handed him to us, and he was in this plastic thing because when they're born that little, he can't regulate his own temperature, so they had to keep him really warm. And then they took him to the NICU, and Dave went with him. And physically I was fine. And from that point on, I went into very much like everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. Yes, he was born early, but, they were telling us all these positive things about him. I'm like, yep, he's going to be fine. And 3 days later, they took the tube out. And they're like, he's doing so well. We're going to put the CPAP mask on him. And we just felt really, really confident that he was going to be fine until the Tuesday. And so we had him Saturday morning, and this was Tuesday night. We'd been in with him every day. I was pumping. I was trying to get milk. I was doing everything that I could. And in the NICU, there's all these incubators. He's in a room with other babies, and he lives in this incubator that helps keep the temperature right and helps it to stay really moistened because his skin's really sensitive because he's so little. And I was just doing the only thing that I could do, which was pump milk for him, and they would try and give it to him when he got stronger. And we felt really positive Tuesday night, and all of a sudden we saw all of these nurses and doctors running to the end of the hall, and it sounds horrible, but we were like, don't be Steele, don't be Steele, don't be Steele. Just anyone else. Like, I know that sounds horrible, but you think it can't be for him. Like, I don't wish that on anyone. And then we walked in, and it was him, and it was just a mess. And they were like, you can't be in here. We need you to go out. We're going to have to reintubate him. He's not coping. And one of the doctors, she was so lovely, her name was Anna, she took us into this little room, and when you go in the little room it's not good, and she said, we think it could be a couple of things, we're going to try and save him, but we might lose him, and you should go and be with him. And we went in, and the nurse helped me put my hand on his chest, and she's like, Mummy's here, and then she said, we need you to move away now, and we will try and intubate him and get him back up. And we were sitting out in the hallway on these chairs, and Dave was holding my hand, and the thought that was going through my head was, oh my God, I'm going to be that mum who loses a child. That's going to be me. That's it. Like, that is my reality now. They stabilised him at that point. But from that moment, I became a lot less naive, and I realised that we might not take him home. And it's what I probably the shock I needed to make me realise the gravity of the situation. The NICU is really, any parent that's been in there will tell you the same thing. I think I read something where 40-something% of NICU parents have PTSD, even if they take their baby home or they don't take their baby home. Going into a hospital and being with your baby and seeing them in this crib, this isolate that you can't touch, well, you can touch them, but you can't hold them, you can't feed them, you can't do any of the things that you naturally should do as a mum. That's the part that causes the trauma. It's not being able to do anything and standing there and realising that all these people you were trusting, all these people around him, that they are going to keep him safe, but you know that they don't love him like you love him, and that they can't keep him safe like you can keep him safe or should be keeping him safe. That feeling of being so helpless for your child is incredibly painful and incredibly traumatic. People say to me, like, you know, you have PTSD because you lost your son. No, I don't. That's not why I do. I have PTSD because I spent so long watching him decline and in pain and unhealthy. I spent so long watching him like that in such a helpless state and not being able to do anything. And I said to people think the worst thing that can happen is death. It's not. It is absolutely not. The worst thing for me was watching my child in pain and not being able to do a thing about it. I couldn't help him. And all I wanted to do was pick him up and tell him it would be okay, but I couldn't. And that was every time that he went downhill, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't pick him up. I couldn't hold him, nothing. Like I couldn't do anything, and it was just, I can't, there's no word for it. It was debilitating. It was soul destroying. And that, you know, I spent 27 days trying to breathe for him. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted him to breathe. I just wanted him to breathe on his own. I wanted him to get bigger. I wanted him to get stronger. And I just had to lay that in the hands of other people. They were fantastic there, I have to say that. The women and the men there at Royal Women's were amazing. Every nurse, every doctor gave us everything that they could. But the way that I work is I didn't want to just leave it to them. I'm like, I need to understand what's happening to him. I need to understand what his chances are. I need to understand, what are these things you're giving him? What is this medication you're giving him? What is this tube down his throat doing? So I spent hours, you know, back at the Ronald McDonald House watching YouTube videos, learning how to read the machine and how to read his oxygen levels and what that meant and why they were adjusting it. And it got to the point where I understood it so thoroughly that there were registrars who were coming in who didn't know as much as I did. And they were saying, oh, you know, his level was this. I'm like, no, it was this yesterday and it was this today, so it's actually improved. Most of the other parents kind of just sat there when the doctors would do their rounds, but I was like, no, I want to be a part of the conversation. I want you to talk to me, not just around me. I need to understand that's the type of person I am. I want to know what's going on with him. And to the point where the head doctor, like I said to him at one stage about their decision to keep him on the ventilator despite the fact that he was showing improvement. And he kind of basically said to me, yeah, well, maybe we missed our mark. And I was there going, you are the head of the neonatal centre and you're telling me that I'm explaining to you how you missed the mark. And I wasn't angry at him because I knew he was trying and he could only do what he could do. He had 50 other babies in the ward, you know. But it was that moment of realising you don't know everything and you're just a human. And to lay my child's life in your hands is not wise. It's not that I don't trust you, but I can see that you can make a mistake. So they were great. Like, they were open when I would say things like, why are you adjusting it to that when we should be trying this, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, during the entire time he was there, he was having ups and downs. But I tried to stay on top of everything, and he was getting bigger and he was getting stronger. The hard part was being away from the other two kids, so they would come and visit him, and they got, you know, those are valuable memories for Daisy to have. Tiger won't remember them, but we got photos with him and all those kinds of things. So towards the end, they said to us, he's not improving. The goal when you have a baby on a ventilator in the NICU is to get them off the ventilator. The longer they stay on that ventilator, the worse their outcomes will be. Every day there'd be a setback, and they'd say to us, well, no, he's not improving here. He's improving this way, but he's not improving in this other way. Then one part of his lung would collapse, and then that would come back, and then the other part would collapse. And towards the start of April, I celebrated my 30th birthday in the NICU. At the start of April, they said to us, he's not improving and we have one option left. And that option is to put him on a very high dose of steroids, which comes with a 60% chance that he will have cerebral palsy. He may have very mild cerebral palsy, or he could have severe cerebral palsy to the point where he's in a wheelchair and he can't do anything for himself. He's fully disabled. And Dave and I said we want to give him one last chance. We like those odds. I just want to give him one last chance. And they said, right, but if this doesn't work, we have nowhere else to go. And we said, just give it a shot. And so they started him on the high-dose steroids. In the first couple of days, he didn't respond. And then the third day, we walked in and his oxygen levels were perfect. And I just couldn't believe it. And both Dave and I, we walked in, we had to wash our hands before we went to him, and I didn't want to look at the screen. I'm like, I'm not going to look at the screen. I'm not going to look at the screen. And then I walked over and I saw it was at 26%, which means he's in air, which means he's needing as little assistance from the ventilator as possible, looking at extubation, and I was just so happy. I was like, oh my God, he's going to be fine, he's going to be fine. And Dave said he was going to go back and get Daisy and Tiger to bring them back for the weekend because it was Easter weekend. And I said, no, I'll go. I think I need to go home for one night and I'll bring them back tomorrow. Steele's stable. This is a perfect time for me to go. I haven't been home in a month. And anyway, got home to pick up Daisy and Tigers, and Steele was still relatively stable. And then picked the kids up, and my sister came out to visit me, and I'd been texting Dave, and then he was just silent. And I was like, this is not good. And he wouldn't answer my phone calls, and he wasn't responding to my text messages. And I just knew. I knew something had happened, and I was messaging, I'm like, please just tell me what it is. And he said he's back in 100% oxygen, and there's nothing that they can do. He's stable. You'll see him tomorrow, but there's nowhere to go. And as soon as he messaged me that, it was incredibly difficult. And the fact that I wasn't there with him, Dave told me later that he just broke down and a nurse was holding him, and he told me he believes that Steele got a little bit better so that I could go home for a night.
Oh.
And, I didn't have to be there to see him go back downhill. And then the next morning, the whole way to Melbourne, I just absolutely bawled my eyes out because I knew what they were going to tell me. I knew what they were going to say when I got there. And Daisy was in the back going, Mum, it's okay. Steele's going to be okay. He's going to come home soon. It's okay. And I couldn't tell her. I'm like, how do you explain this to your 6-year-old? And we got down there, and I knew that what was coming. And the doctor pulled us into a room, and I'll never, ever, ever forget it. And she was so lovely, and she was Irish, and I love Irish accents. And she sat us down, and Dave's mum had come, so she was watching Daisy and Tiger. And they took us into the small room again, and she said, we tried the high-dose steroids. They're not working. And she said, I think he's going to die. And even though I knew that's what she was going to say, there was just a part of me there's got to be one way out. There's got to be some way out. There's got to be a way to save him. There has to be. And then I looked at Dave, and Steele had gotten so big to the point where he was pulling the tube out because he hated it so much. It's painful, I said, I can't have him in pain anymore. They had also paralysed him because he kept pulling the tube out. And it was just horrible. And I was like, this isn't living. This is not living. This is a nightmare for him. This is a nightmare for me. This is a nightmare for everyone. This is not living. And I just said to Dave, I don't know about you, but if he's not going to survive, I don't want to push him for what purpose? And I said to the doctor who was there, and there was 2 other doctors on, this is Good Friday, and I said, there's about 70 years experience between the 3 of you. Can you just tell me, have you ever seen a baby come back from here? And they said no. Like he basically couldn't breathe. Like his body was not getting enough oxygen into his blood. And they're like, he's suffocating essentially. And so I said to them, our kids are here. Like, I don't want them to see their brother die. Like, what do we do? And the lady who was like the social worker, she said, we have lots of families who send their kids home, and we have lots of families who keep their kids here. And I said, but what does that do to a kid? Like, to witness something like that? And they said, well, kids are more resilient than what you think they are. And every parent that we know who's kept the children here has never regretted it. They're like, we'll take you to a room and you can be with him and the family can be with him. And we got photos and we got to give him a little like bath and put clothes on him, which he'd never worn clothes. And they're like, you'll get to see him without all the tubes in and you'll get to hold him. And I said, I just don't want him in pain. I do not want him in pain. I don't care what happens. I don't want him to be in pain. They said, no, he will be taken off the paralytic because legally he can't be in his system when he passes, but he will have morphine, like he'll be asleep. And yeah, they were great. Like they let us take our time. They're like, there's no time limit on this. You want to hold him for 2 hours, you want to hold him for 10 hours, you want to hold him for 50 hours. There's no time limit where we would do what feels right for you and your family. And so, yeah, we got to all hold him. And obviously my 2-year-old was not understanding of how serious the situation was, and he wanted to draw on the baby. So I was like, that's, we're in this room, we're saying goodbye to him, and our whole family's there, his brother, his sister, his nan, his mum and his dad. And if you have to go, like, it was the best we could do for him. And he got to know what it was like to be part of our family for a really short time. That he got to know, he got to be in a room where we were laughing and we were holding each other and we were talking, and we got that moment. Like, we got that moment with him. And that was 27 days of Steele.
Oh, Wes, thank you so much for sharing that. Like, I don't know anybody who could sit and hear that experience without tears in their eyes. That's incredibly, I can't even imagine that experience.
It's so funny that you say that, because I remember, like, after we lost him, I just wanted to find other women who'd lost as well. And I wanted to know that, their story. And I wanted to, when you go through something like this, you want people who have been through it with you. Like, you want to be in that moment. And by some horrible chance, the 2 little boys who were actually born on the same day as Steele, they both passed away, and I spoke to their mum, and we were going through it at the same time. Like, it's an experience that it's a club that no one wants to be a part of, but everyone in it gets it, and no one else outside of it does. People keep telling me that they can't imagine. And the funny thing is, they can imagine, and it is as horrible as what you think it is. And I remember feeling that way when I'd heard about a friend who had lost, had just had Daisy, and she lost her 2 little girls, twins. They were stillborn, and the grief that I felt, just hearing about it, I just cried and cried for hours for her. And I do truly believe that women and mothers, when you hear about another woman like that, there's a part of you that experiences that, like in a very small, minute way. It's not the same, but you know that feeling. It's familiar to all of us, that feeling of, I could lose that, and that's how that would feel. You get that tiny little snippet of how it feels. And when I was going through it with Steele, I was like, this is the same feeling. It's just magnified 1,000 times worse because it's my child. But I do believe that people who heard about Steele and our story, that they probably did feel, especially my family, like my poor sister. God, she was camping and she got the news, and she hates people seeing her cry. And I think the 30 people there would have seen her cry, and she would have been very devastated about that.
Before the experience happened, you touched on the fact that you were really quite stressed at work. I do have insight into knowing you before this interview, so I know you're a person that chooses to move forward through a challenging situation before you ask for help. You move forward on your own. Please, correct me if this reflection is not aligned. But it sounds like prior to this experience, if there was something that was quite stressful, you chose to hold it on your own and continue forward anyway. And what I'm hearing from the other side of this experience, that you're choosing to be open, choosing to share some of that, so that not only can you help other people to understand where you're at, but you're inviting in that support and that love that you need to be able to move forward. Is that an accurate reflection, and has that changed the way you deal with stress?
Yeah, 100%. It's actually part of the story that I suppose, I hate to say, look at the positives that came out of it, because that's...
It feels very cliche, doesn't it?
100%.
Yeah.
But prior to our experience, me and my husband, we had very differing ways of dealing with things, and that caused a lot of issues in our marriage, to the point where we almost did get a divorce. And a lot of it was due to exactly that, the fact that I would not open up to him. I would not let him in. I didn't like being seen as vulnerable, and he's the opposite. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's very open with his emotions, and he's very fluent in that kind of language. Like, I always say this, Steele came into my heart and cracked it wide open. And it is something that my other 3 kids have done in their own way, but I actually think that it's the gift that Steele gave me, was saying, Mum, it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to open up your heart. And here's the opening, he's broken my heart, but he's also opened it. And during the loss of him and the process that we went through, I've never felt closer to Dave. Like, I couldn't believe, my walls all came down, and I was so vulnerable, and I was so terrified, and he wrapped his arms around me and protected me and looked after me. And even when he was drowning, I said that the other day, like, someone said, you want to find someone who will build you a boat to help you get over things. And I said, you built me a boat while you were drowning. And it's one of the best things for our marriage, like, for me to finally be able to go, you know what, I can't keep pushing you out. I can't keep doing that. And our marriage now is in the best place it's ever been. Ever been. And there's a multitude of factors that goes into that. But post losing Steele, it didn't just immediately happen. Like, I did just, it was a huge process for me. The first thing I did was my GP was fantastic. He's a friend of ours. We've known him for years. And he was like, we're going to get you on a mental health plan. I want you to see a psychologist, all of these things. And me and Dave did both do that. That was something that we prioritized. I want to be mentally okay. Like, I have 2 other children. I can't fall apart. And,
yes.
Daisy, for one of the first times in her life, saw me crying. And that brought her closer to me, because she was like, oh, my God. And she would be like, it's okay, Mum. She would hug me every time. Tiger would laugh at me, but he was 2. That was another layer to it, was watching your 6-year-old lose their brother and comprehend grief. It's so hard. She can't comprehend it fully, but she did amazing, and kids really are resilient. But the process took a long time. So I started seeing a psychologist, and she gave me some books to read. One of them was Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. He basically talks about how trauma lives in the body, and how it can impact you health-wise. And one of the biggest takeaways from what happened with Steele was, we always take our health for granted until we don't have it anymore. We always take it for granted. And the smallest little things, and I thought, all I wanted was for him to take a breath on his own. I didn't want anything else. I just wanted him to be able to take a breath on his own. That's it, And I started to realize, if I don't get myself right mentally and emotionally, it can cause just as much damage as if I physically don't look after myself. Like, this is important.
What do you think in that book, sorry to interrupt you, but what do you think in that book helped you to see that more clearly than it did hearing it from a psychologist? Or how is the discussion different? What clicked for you?
I think the science behind it really helped me. So, like, obviously in the book he talks a lot about statistics and research, and he talks about the ACEs score, so adverse childhood experiences and things like that, and how that shows up later in life. And one of my biggest driving factors is, I don't want this to be detrimental to my other 2 kids' lives. Like, I could just fall apart. I could absolutely fall apart and go into this depressive, cycle. And some people do, and some people need to grieve that way. Everyone grieves differently. But I had 2 kids that needed to be fed and taken to school and looked after, and, I that wasn't an option for me. And partially it was a good thing, because it did give me purpose, and it did give me meaning, and it did give me a reason to get up in the morning. On the other part of it, it was also really difficult, because there wasn't a lot of space for me to just sit in my grief. I took time off work, which was good. And some days I would just sit here and I would just cry and cry and cry. And I just needed to do that. I just needed to do it. What also didn't help in the time was that 3 months after he passed away, we fell pregnant with Navy. And so I went from being in grief to being in this really highly anxious state of, this can happen again. And I knew that, and I was prepared for that, because I'd spoken to my psychologist around the fact that we wanted to have another baby. Well, after we lost Steele, the biggest thing that helped me through was exercise and cold showers. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it really did, because it gave me something to do. Instead of sitting there crying all day, it really helped me to have like a process to follow each day.
Do you think it helped you move? You just talked before about having emotions stored in the body. Do you think it helped it come out?
Somatic experience, 100%. 100%.
Yes.
Physical movement was helping me release those emotions, 100%. Yeah. And then once I fell pregnant with Navy, I was very much on high risk pregnancy. So that means no exercise, no sex, no nothing, no vigorous movements of any kind. And that was for 9 months. And during that 9 months, I was thinking, all I want to do is do exercise. It is something I took for granted because I can't do it now. It's so horrible. I just want to go for a walk. Nat couldn't do a walk. What about a swim? Nat couldn't go swimming. Literally couldn't do anything. And that exacerbated the anxiety because I had no release.
Days.
It just stayed within my body. And then the anxiety got worse because I'm thinking, now the stress is going to harm the baby.
Yeah.
So, after we had Navy, I was finally in a place where I could prioritize health and why it mattered to me. Because all I keep thinking is, my son's life got taken away. I don't want to waste a second of mine because what a slap in the face to him. How horrible to him having missed all of these things and it's all available to me. How lucky I am to be able to wake up in the morning. How lucky I am to be here. How incredible it is that we live in a beautiful home, that I have a wonderful husband, I have 3 healthy children. What an absolute blessing. And none of that can be taken for granted. Like, it's something that I think every day. If I didn't prioritize my health, what does that mean? Like, I'm going to get sick, and then what does that look like? My other kids suffer and my husband suffers. And like, it's not just for me. Like, prioritizing my health has never just been for me. It's been for my whole family. It's important. I get Navy up out of his cot and I take a moment and I go and I smell his blonde little hair. Little fun fact, he was born with a mark on the back of his neck and it's in the shape of angel wings. And it's called an angel's kiss. None of our other kids have it. And he was born 10 days after Steele's first birthday. And he was born in the same place, just across the hall. And his birth was so quick and easy, no issues, not one problem. And he was the first baby that I ever got to hold straight after he was born. And that's all I wished for. And I swear to God, my little boy in the sky, he gave that to me, 100%. And that's where my husband said, and that's it, we're done. He's so traumatized, he can't do it again. He cannot do it again. But yeah, those and everything, like, it has made me just realize that there's things that matter and there's things that don't. Like, I don't get upset over these stupid things. I realize that my relationships with my family, with my friends, with my children, all of that, that's what matters, those moments with them. And now I'm able to just sit in it. I'm able to just sit with my dad and be like...
Yeah, and be present.
Present.
Yes.
And that is something that, has changed my life for the better. It has absolutely changed my life for the better because prior to that, I was not present. I was living in this other world. I was unhealthy. I was not eating properly. I was not exercising. I was not doing any of those things because I didn't realize they all interlink. What you're putting into your body is creating your DNA and how it's expressing itself. When you're exercising, you are growing a stronger, healthier body, And I think
and you're moving the emotions like we talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Like,
you're coming back to yourself.
Yeah.
Out of your into your body.
Yeah, 100%. And those are the things that I prioritize now. So, people laugh at me because I have such a strict schedule, but there's a lot to, get in there in a week when I work full time, 3 children, prioritizing exercise, but it gets done. And when I'm organized, then every moment that my kids are awake and I have them here, I'm present with them. And I've never been happier. I've never felt more content. And I think it's almost a contrast because losing Steele has allowed me to see how horrible it can be, life, and cruel and unfair. But it's also made me realize, in contrast to that, how beautiful things are and that life is what you make it. And that, I know that sounds cliche, but it's true. No one has the power to change your life or to make it better or worse but you. No one has that power.
I'm so happy for you. Honestly, genuinely, I'm so happy for you with where you're at right now. Like, it's It's a really beautiful thing to see you so happy, even though you had such shade that you had to experience. But, you know, as you say, you can't have the light without the shade. Yeah. What would you say to other women who have or are going through a similar experience to what you've been through?
I've spoken to a lot of women who've lost children. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're here. It's incredibly painful, but reach out when you can. That's the biggest takeaway. Reach out. I know that some women who lose children, they don't want to talk to anyone who hasn't lost a child because they can't understand it. And I do understand that. I spoke to people who haven't lost a child, and no, it's not the same. But if you need to speak to women who have lost a child, then you can find them. Like, you know, you can find me, you can find lots of people, but find them. You know, I read a beautiful book that was called Ask Me His Name, and it was actually gifted to me by a friend who had lost her son. And I needed to read that at the moment that I read it. It was 3 months after he'd passed, and everything she said in that book, it just so aligned with me in those moments. It was so raw. And it broke my heart all over again. And reading her story, I even said to my husband, sometimes I feel like I cry more about other people's story than I cry about our story. It's so weird. But reach out and look for ways to keep your baby's memory alive in any way that you can.
And what would you say to friends, family, new acquaintances, work colleagues to help them to understand what may be needed when somebody else is going through an experience of grief of a child?
Big one is the name of that book. Say their name. Hearing their name is so important because it feels like a little bit of life is breathed back into you know, where he's missing from. And hearing that people are thinking about him, or they're thinking about us, or, you know, on his birthday and on his anniversary of his passing, and those moments are so important. And also, don't be afraid that they cry, because they will cry because they miss their baby. And there is nothing wrong with that. That's normal for them to want to cry about it. Don't be scared of the crying. Like, just be open and give them that space. You know, if you feel in the moment that they want a hug, just say, you know, can I hold your hand, or can I give you a hug? Or, you know, I met a guy for a first time at a work thing, and he was at a networking connection I was making, and I told him the story of Steele, and he handled it really well, and he said the right thing. He said, I'm so sorry. And then I'm not really a hugger, and he's like, can I hug you? And I was like, sure, I've just met you, but we hugged. And it was really nice. The worst thing that you can do to a bereaved parent is pretend like the elephant's not in the room. I'm living and breathing this grief right now. I want you to acknowledge that.
If I was to summarise what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like at the very beginning, prior to Steele joining us on this side of the world, you know, you had a lot of stress. You weren't sure how to process that stress. The situation itself, when Steele arrived, was incredibly stressful. The outtake from that yourself, Dave, Daisy, Navy, Tiger all have now is that understanding of how to recognise stress, or how to recognise an emotion, a strong emotion. And it sounds like you are, both you and Dave, and also the kids, are helping each other to move through the expression of those emotions in a more productive way. That's a beautiful, beautiful experience as a whole, even though you had to experience so much trauma.
Yeah.
The world is only going to be better because of people like you.
Oh, God.
Honestly.
I hope so.